China insinuating today that President Trump is lying. Just this moment, a spokesperson for China's foreign ministry saying that as far as he knows, China and the United States have not held any consultations or meetings or negotiations on tariffs. And the idea that China and the U.S. have been engaged in talks, which President Trump has been asserting, is, quote, fake news. But President Trump repeated his claim. Here's what he said when asked about it this morning.
Clarify with whom the U.S. is speaking with China. They're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China. And so I think you have, Jeff, as usual, I think you have your reporting wrong.
We should note that the communist Chinese government has a long history of lying. Although, anyway, while the president continues to assert that negotiations are very active with China, it appears the U.S. is no closer to striking any sort of trade deal. What may be even more telling is that U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said yesterday that it could take 2 to 3 years to fully rebalance trade with China, which they say is the goal, or at least one of the goals of this tariff situation. Let's start our coverage today with CNN's Caitlin Collins at the White House. And Caitlin, first of all Jeff was doing there was quoting what the Chinese were saying, and he was quoting them accurately. What is the Trump administration telling you about this back and forth between China and President Trump?
Yeah, Jake, that wasn't some anonymously sourced report. It was the Foreign Ministry spokesperson and the Commerce Ministry. We're hearing from them on the record in this regard. Now, maybe there's some nuance here in who is doing the negotiating, because the president was saying that the teams were meeting today, the U.S. teams and then Chinese officials. He declined to say which members of the team were going into that. He said maybe he would reveal that later, but did not ultimately say. And essentially what Chinese officials had been saying in response to the president saying that there were active negotiations happening every day is that that's not how they would describe it. No active negotiations, much less anywhere close to an agreement between the United States and China. And so that's really the question here in terms of what this looks like and whether they're actually making any real progress. We've seen Wall Street looking at the president's comments. Anytime he strikes even a little bit of a softer tone on China, the numbers go up. But there's a real question of what that looks like. And we're starting to see people warning about the longer this goes on, the more damaging it could potentially be. We saw that from Republican senators. We saw it from people like Ken Griffin, the billionaire, who is one of the Republican Party's biggest donors, if not the biggest donor. And so that's really the question here, is this seems to be getting to a situation where it's the United States and China seeing who is going to blink first. One thing that has been made clear at the White House is they would at least like them to blink at the same time. But obviously, Jake, that's still an open question at this point.
You aware, Caitlin, of any trade deals that the White House has unquestionably made progress on?
The only thing that we heard today that stood out was the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying inside the Oval Office that he believes South Korea is actually moving a lot faster than he expected. As he described it, he said South Korean officials brought their A game to the negotiations, and he expects them to have a memorandum of understanding. Now, of course, Jake, getting to that point and having a top line is nowhere near the same thing as having an actual trade deal, which is incredibly complicated and layered, hammered out. And so that's a key area to watch. He seemed very hopeful and optimistic about that. But it is certainly something to watch, especially as the president put the number at 90 countries yesterday that the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is speaking to. Lutnick himself saying that number as well. Obviously, that's a lot to do in 90 days, Jake, with the clock already counting.
With me now to discuss is Joe Moglia. He's the former CEO and chairman of TD Ameritrade. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. So turning back to the conversation we were having with Caitlin.
Jake.
Thank you so much. Turning back to the conversation we were having with Caitlin Collins about this back and forth about China and the U.S. and whether or not the trade negotiations are happening. So China's denying it. President Trump is saying it's true. How does this back and forth affect the market at all?
I think if you look at what took place today, Jake, the markets were up. So it looks like the market, I think, is used to hearing China lie about things, and they're used to hearing the president exaggerate about things. So whatever took place today, the markets responded very, very positively. Now, from a longer-term perspective, if the tariffs are going to continue for a long period of time, the probability of a recession becomes very, very real.
I want to play something that Citadel CEO and Donald Trump mega donor Ken Griffin said yesterday. Keep in mind, this is a quote from somebody who is a huge supporter of President Trump. Roll the tape.
Yes.
Right. The United States was more than just a nation. It's a brand. It's a universal brand, whether it's our culture, our financial strength, our military strength. America rose beyond just being a country. It was like an aspiration for most of the world. And we're eroding that brand right now.
Bree, do you think President Trump is damaging the brand of the U.S. and the U.S. economy? And do you think that's signaling to the world that the U.S. is no longer a safe place to park investments, as we've seen with the bond market going down?
I think I have a lot of respect for Ken. I think there's certainly some validity into that. I think that my perspective on this is that the president is a narcissist and he wants to look good and he wants to win. And I think he brags about being a great deal maker. And he looks at the stock market as, going back to 2016, as a very real indication of what his success has been. So that type of personality, I think there's a pretty good chance that he's using the tariffs as a negotiating ploy to be able to bring people to the table. And if he gets anything out of that, he will be able to claim a series of wins. If indeed he's able to do that, I think he backs off, and I think we're okay. If he's not able to do that, there's going to be an issue. I don't know if our brand is suffering, although I do think a lot of other countries are annoyed at us because of the president and because of the tariffs.
So we've been talking to small business men and women all over the country since this tariff thing started, just to hear what they think. Some of them love Trump, some of them not so much. Some of them love the tariffs, some of them not so much. One thing that they all say is they're concerned about stability and the need for stability and predictability in the markets so that they can do long range and long-term planning. Do you share those concerns?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we don't have that now, but kind of the point I was making a little while ago, I think there are a lot of reasons to be bullish, but it's long-term. You've got a great impact with regard to AI. You've got you've got deregulation. You've got lower taxes. You've got an accommodative Fed. You've got a business-oriented administration. But so therefore, if indeed my perspective on this is accurate and he's using these for negotiating ploys, then we could get this behind us over the span of the next 6, 12, 14, 16 weeks. If we do that, I think we're okay. If we don't do that, we're going to have a far more significant issue. But if we don't get it fixed, there's going to be a problem. So I believe we're going to get this fixed.
Yeah, I guess the only concern is, having listened to President Trump quite a bit, just it's my job. He seems to really believe in tariffs, not just as a short-term negotiating tool, but as a long-term economic strategy. He looks at the McKinley era as successful, not because of the Industrial Revolution and not because of mass migration and no regulations, no minimum wage, no OSHA standards, et cetera. He looks at that era as successful because of the tariffs. If that is his view, and the tariffs are here to stay as long as he's president, what do you think then?
Then I think we're going to have a recession. I think if that's specifically his view, but the reason why I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, is that the guy's a narcissist and he wants to look good. And it wasn't an accident that a week ago, when everything, when the S&P was below 5,000, and we had the 10-year note, really, really significantly higher. You have Jamie Dimon complaining about what's going on. You have a couple of his friends come to the White House that were serious business leaders to kind of say, be careful here. He changed his mind. He changed his view on a lot of things, and we had a significant reaction the other way. I don't think he's going to allow himself for too long a period to look bad. And because of his personality, I think that there's a reason. There are good reasons for that to work out that way.